Welcome to the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are visiting with Charlie Lerman, who is the Western Regional Manager of NCFI Geotechnical, but as he would prefer to be known as the Grout Geek. The Grout Geek. I love that. And so we met on LinkedIn, and what really caught my eye was he's got a little known show. I guess you would call it a podcast of sorts, called Grout Rants. And the last couple episodes that I tuned into, I was just so intrigued by the topics that I needed to invite him to come onto the show. Because as many of you know, that I've done, marketing and consulting for a number of polymer companies, spray pipe polyurethanes, et cetera, and chemicals in the industry. And so I really thought I had a pretty good handle on what some of these things meant. Maybe not all the technical things where I could recommend the specification on an application, but enough about the terminology that I knew the difference to talk about it, or at least so I thought. And when I listened to Charlie's rant about hydrophilic and hydrophobic, wow, did the light bulb go on over my head. And that I never realized there were so many fine, and what you may even say subtle nuances that you almost need to read between the lines when you're looking for something to fit the application properly. And so no more spoiler alerts. And so that's what we're going to be talking today. And I'm going to basically have Charlie kind of reiterate what he did on his rant for your benefit. So welcome to the show, Charlie. Really excited to have you on.
Well, Susan, thank you. It's an honor being on here. I've seen you on LinkedIn for years, and I think you were involved in social media before I even realized much about it. So no, it's an honor to be here. So, but yeah, and I am self-titled the Grout Geek. I've been 20 years now on the manufacturer side for urethanes. Normally a single component. The last year I've been with NCFI, so we're working with dual component as well. But single component is my whole. I'm passionate about it. Oddly so, but just as I think everybody in this industry gets really passionate. It's weird to say in public that I'm passionate about wastewater and sewer and all that stuff, but it's true. So when we look at terms, people are familiar with different types of grouts, all right? And the basic chemistries, when you look at single component, there's hydrophilic and hydrophobic. And that's how people always kind of rank these. And it's one of the first things. It's like if you had a flow chart, that's the first thing. Do I use hydrophilic, hydrophobic? And if I have an impact on the industry, it's that in that flow chart, before you get to hydrophilic, hydrophobic, you look at flexible versus rigid. We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the differences there. So just first off, anybody who can break down a word knows a little bit of Latin. Hydrophilic is loving, whereas hydrophobic is fearing. So if you just go based off that, then you're like, well, one pushes water away and one attracts water. That's what most people go with. And overall, that is relatively correct. But it's not the exact thing of it there. So when you break it down, we're looking at how these are prepolymers. Both are prepolymers. One of them, the hydrophilics, when it catalyzes, it gets an open cross-linking, meaning that it can take water into its cell structure and give it up also. All right. Now, this is not like a sponge. You can't just squeeze it out there. It's chemically bound in there, but it can evaporate. It can lose moisture. And that's why hydrophilics want to stay in a moist environment. Notice I use the word moist, not wet. People think, oh my gosh, if this thing isn't wet all the time, there's going to be a problem. That's not the case. When you look at average humidity of concrete, it's right around 60%. A lot of the soils below grade, you're around 60%. That's plenty to keep a hydrophilic nice and moist there. All right, we just don't want it to get in real dry situations. That's where you run into trouble. And anybody down in Arizona, New Mexico, you may have those even a foot or two down in the ground. Okay,
right.
Those are kind of unique states. But hydrophobics, on the other hand, their cross-linking is a closed cross-linking, which means that once it takes in the amount of water it wants, it's done. It's not going to take more water in. It's not going to give more water out. We can go down to Arizona, put it out in the middle of the desert, as long as you put a little umbrella over it because it's not UV stable. It's not going to change its size. It's not going to give up anything. So those are the two things there. Now here's the difference. Hydrophilics, unless they're turning into a gel, if they're producing a foam, they can only take a certain quantity of water. We'll call that X, all right? So whether X is 1 times or 10 times, once it takes that volume and turns into foam, it's working just like a hydrophobic. It's pushing the water away. Hydrophobics, they take 4 to 7% water by volume, and they're done with the water. All right, so they're both very similar. They're both prepolymers, but they both chase water. They both want to have water around, and they want to react in a water environment there. So that's a quick overview on those there. Then the other thing with hydrophilics and hydrophobics is when you look at your application, what you're trying to do with them. When we look at crack injection or joint injection, let's talk about joints. Joints are, it's a joint in concrete or a joint in precast or something like that. They're typically wider. Grouts penetrate those very easy. Anything under about 500 centipoise is easily going to penetrate those. But when you start talking about cracks, people start looking, okay, I want the lowest viscosity possible so I can penetrate this crack. That sounds correct. It's not always. When you start looking at odd structures, say like you're talking about a potable water tank, these things are 3 foot thick. They're chock full of rebar. That means they don't get large cracks in them because the rebars hold it together. They get hairline cracks that barely weep. They're a nightmare to inject in anyway. But the first thought is, well, I'm going to use the thinnest polyurethane I can, and I'm going to inject a hydrophilic because those are typically thinner than hydrophobics. But here's the deal. That hydrophilic, the second it sees water, it starts to react, okay? So as we inject it and we apply pressure to it, we're used to what's a Newtonian fluid. This means that it's non-compressible and that any force you put on it is equally dispersed throughout the whole system there. That's Pascal's law, all right? So, but with hydrophilics, the second they see water, so basically as you're injecting them, they turn into a rheological fluid, meaning they start producing carbon dioxide. They are now compressible. The viscosity has gone up. So that whole, hey, I've got a lower viscosity thing is out the window when you've got a hairline crack trying to get in there. So yeah. So those are some of the differences there with those two urethane chemistries.
Well, now something else you touched on is like subtle nuances. Aside from that, like other things you were saying, we'll come back to that later, on the things above the chart when you're looking for the application and the criteria side by side. What are some of the things that you should be looking at as far as an application with selecting a grout that go beyond just the basics of, do I want hydrophobic or do I want hydrophilic? That it goes even deeper.
And thank you for bringing me back into that. So when you look at your grout application, the first thing I like to look at, the very first thing is, do I need a flexible or a rigid? And when I say rigid, that could be semi-rigid, a rigid, or a gel. All those kind of fall in the rigid. So flexible is the thing that stands out from those. Anytime you're in a dynamic situation that you feel that you're going to see movement. So cracks and joints, those are great for flexibility. You know they're going to move. They're designed to move. That's the idea. And that doesn't mean you can't use a rigid in those. It means that if it ever does move, it will fail. But I see all the time rigids used in potential areas where you see potential movement there. But the other thing besides cracks and joints, you're looking at pipe penetrations. So let's go to that manhole. we're in a precast manhole that has a PVC pipe coming through, and it's grouted in with cementitious grout. The cementitious grout and the manhole have about the same coefficient of expansion when they change temperatures. PVC doesn't. So you give that a couple cycles, what happens? You get a debonding between there and it leaks. And then you look at your classic thing in a manhole, you come in and someone goes, oh, I'll just put more hydraulic cement on that. It solved the problem. A year or two later, it's leaking again. They come in and put more. And all of a sudden, it starts looking like after 5 years that cement ants have been building a mound around this thing. It's just giant. It's ridiculous. Right.
Oh,
so
no.
if you do that once, you inject it with a polyurethane that's flexible, and it's a long-term repair. Yes, it costs more than hydraulic cement, but you're not having the expense of going back out there multiple times. You're also not sending somebody into a confined space. We're doing it as minimal as possible, which is important for safety factor there.
Well, Charlie, that kind of leads us to that old axiom, pay me now or pay me later, or keep paying and keep paying and keep paying, because you're not selecting. It might be more expensive, but you were saying all those other things that come along. You have to keep doing it. But let's talk about safety. Think about the cost every time you have to do a confined space entry.
Yes.
There's a lot of costs associated with that we don't even think about.
Indeed. And the other thing is that even if you are just doing it with hydraulic cement, the time period between you identify the leak and you address it, you have all that treatment cost. And I live in Seattle. I was surprised to see, because I hadn't looked at it in a while. We're up to like $22 per 1,000 gallons for treatment costs here. We are the highest cost in the nation. And when you look at a 10-gallon a minute leak, that's over $100,000 worth of treatment cost. It's incredible that we're all throwing this money just literally down the drain.
So. Right. And, the whole object is to keep only the sewer water in the sewer and all the other water out or going into the storm drains. So that leads me to, a follow-up of something that you mentioned about expansion and flexibility, is that looking, I live in Northern Arizona, but I spent many years in Southern California, seismically active area. So, your topography and freeze-thaw cycles, you think, oh, well, you live in California, you don't have to worry about freeze-thaw cycles, but you've got the ground movement to worry about.
Yes.
So maybe talk about that a little bit. There's some other criteria that you really have to think about just beyond, I want to seal a leak.
Yep. So when we talk about freeze-thaw, unless you start living up north, you don't see a lot of that. You see big temperature changes, but that doesn't mean you don't need flexibility, because if you're up north, you get that one freeze and then you thaw out, and that's it. You get this one movement cycle. But you're in northern Texas, up Missouri, stuff like that. Cold, hot, and you're just constantly. So you're seeing that movement a lot. So let's talk about the effects on different urethane chemistries. Hydrophilics, if you're worried about freeze-thaw, you do not want to use a hydrophilic. They are mostly water, and that means that they are susceptible to freeze-thaw. That is an issue with them. Hydrophobics, on the other hand, have, through various testings, it's between 9 and 10% water absorption. That doesn't mean they're passing that water through them, but they are closed cell, but they're outside of their skin. You got a lot of open cells, and that's we assume about 10% water absorption. So if we're worried about freeze-thaw, we've reduced that worry 90% with hydrophobics. And honestly, in my 20 years, I've never heard of a hydrophobic failing due to a freeze-thaw. So there are flexible hydrophobics. So whenever you're worried about either the wet-dry cycling or freeze-thaw, hydrophobics are the way to go. I lean towards them. It's also because I started in this industry down in Houston, Texas, where it's very hot, and didn't quite understand how strong or how water or wet drying resistant hydrophilics could be. So I just stayed away from them. I was nervous of them. But the other thing now that I want to mention with hydrophobics versus hydrophilics is their bond strength. You will see this listed, and hydrophilics hands down, they have a much better bond strength and they have a better elongation, meaning they can move more than a hydrophobic. Typically, hydrophobic is only about 100% elongation. All right, that's a good flexible hydrophobic. Whereas hydrophilics are typically, when we're talking urethane chemistry, about 300% elongation. 3 times. That sounds wonderful, which is. But the other thing is that the bond strength is higher. This, I don't believe at all. In the field, it's not. When you do an ASTM test, you have virgin concrete there that you put your hydrophilic on and then you do your test with. Yes, you get an excellent bond strength of that. You get 3 types of bonds out of both of them. You're going to get a adhesive, a compressive, and a mechanical bond. When I'm doing field work, any adhesive bond I get, I look at as a bonus, all right? We're working in a sewer, we're below grade or something like that. We've got algae, we got poop, we got all types of contaminants. We flush this with water, all right? You can't tell me that we have a virgin concrete to bond to. So I don't look at the bond strength of hydrophilics as any better than hydrophobics because I feel that neither one of them are really getting any adhesive bond in there.
Well, you're thinking about the environment. Yes. That's what you just said. It's the environment. When they test and you're proving it out, it is in a perfect condition. And we all know in the field, it isn't a perfect world out there.
And that's this industry is so small that we don't have our own ASTM testing. We borrow from all other ASTMs that are somewhat appropriate. But with that, a lot of minutiae is lost in the detail. And it makes it very difficult for people on the outside to look at tech data sheets and compare manufacturers to each other because they each want to just tout what's available. There's no good standardization. So hopefully we can work on that better.
Right. So is there anything else that we have forgotten that people really need to know about these 2 different terms in terms of what's the right thing for my project and how should I go about approaching it? We talked about freeze-thaw. We talked about seismic activity, which kind of, again, it's ground shifting. It's kind of interrelated. Anything else that you want to leave us with as pearls of wisdom regarding these 2 types of material?
There's a number of companies that manufacture grouts, and there used to be even more. Anybody who was making epoxy tried to make a grout, but they found they didn't have the service to do this. So what I'm getting at is the companies that are around now typically are companies that are offering some good technical service. That's what you want to lean on. I always tell people, even if you're doing the same thing, give me a call and run it by me. Lean on that because there's a lot of minutia. And what I find is a lot of people out there grouting, they grout 10 times a year. It's not something they're doing every single day. And so with that, you use your manufacturer, ask them the minutia, put the responsibility on them for picking the grout there. Manufacturers would love to manufacture one product and that's it and go to town with that. We have tons of different grouts because we need different things for different applications. And I know the majority, matter of fact, all the manufacturers that I've worked for, they have grouts that they only produce on request. So if you don't even know about them, you don't know to ask that. So talk to your manufacturer. They will tell you which one and point you whether it's hydrophilic, hydrophobic, or whatnot. That's really what I recommend.
That's a great recommendation about not knowing that those custom formulations for what you need, because you may need something that isn't readily off the shelf. And, it's never a one size fits all.
No.
How can it be? How can it be?
No, and that's what keeps this industry so excellent is that, there's not a McDonald's that can say, this is how we make fries here and here. It's different everywhere. And each job, even if you're only 50 feet away from your other spot, it's a total different animal. So yeah, it's a lot of paying attention to all the details.
Yeah, and let's think about this too, is that the infrastructure is aging. And what we were dealing with a structure 10 years ago may be very different today.
There is so much sewer pipe out there. I forget the exact number, but I think it's to the moon and back multiple times easily. The average age of it is 40 to 55 years old.
Wow.
All right. I'm 50. I know my joints are failing. So I know that sewer pipe is doing bad. So yeah, there's a lot of work out there and more every day.
Right. So Charlie, a little spoiler or teaser. We're going to continue this conversation, and next thing we're going to be talking about the differences since we contrasted these two, is to contrast another thing: single and dual component. And what does that really mean for you? And so, Charlie, I really want to thank you for coming on and redoing your rant on the show for me about hydrophobic versus hydrophilic. I know I learned something. And for those who might want to tune in to the rants or connect with you or learn more about what you're doing at your company, NCFI, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm active on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way, right there. I really don't. Yeah, that's the best route. So I try to put my rants out every Wednesday morning about 8:30 Pacific time, 11:30. I guess that's the algorithm says the best time around lunchtime on Wednesday. So, but that's where I try to shoot them out. But yeah, reach out to me and we'll help you out any way we can.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to our next episode and this next topic. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. Hope you got something out of today's episode. And thanks so much for your time. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.